There they were. So first they get on the phone to Buckley. It used to be Buckley's Mill down in Nardine. And the lad, it was International Paper owned it then. He asked the lad if he could borrow it with the idea, because most mills, all mills I should say, were down with the exception of probably 3. And the guy said, okay, you can have it. And he got Israel. Israel, again, was only about 22 years old. Israel took a bunch of lads and they went down to what we call the French Rococo, and they disassembled, not trying and fathom, like, limited tools. They had, of course, go by a horse and wagon. I think they had 3 or 4 teams. Disassemble the thing. And they had to do that because the bridge at that time wouldn't hold the weight of the entire wheel.
The Morrissey Bridge.
No, that would have been it would have been a mill, right? As you're going down the bit of a causeway there in Nordine, there was behind that there was a bridge. This is before the causeway was built. So
a trestle bridge kind of.
Yeah, basically it was a trestle.
Yeah.
And they had to take it apart, which they brought it up to Nelson, assemble it again. Like, I just think of, what it took to do that. And Israel was in charge of the transportation, assembly. So they got it outside the mill, and it had to go back onto the spindle. And they had a couple of millwrights. Percy brought in 2 millwrights from, I think, made in St. John. So they were the quote-unquote experts. And the idea was that the piece had to go back in. So they were looking at it and they discovered that it would not go back in because it was too high to go back in the mill. And they tried all kinds of things for 3 or 4 days. And and of course Percy was just beside himself, because they had a boat to be loaded. This was 1930 at that time. They had a boat to be loaded, and men were to be working, and possibly a few cents they could make.
Yeah.
So he said to the lads, "All right, you guys come back tomorrow, and we have to have answers." So the crowd of them left. Israel and some of the lads in the worked at the mill. He said to them, "Hang by, boys, we're gonna see what we can do here." So he went in, and he had already told the guys, to the millwrights, he said, they wanted to cut 2 of the spans of the things across the top of the mill.
The rafters.
On the rafters. Yeah. And they, and Israel said, "No, you can't do that because, literally the roof will fall in." So Israel took the lads, and they figured out, he figured out, they took the whole friggin' thing apart again, and they brought it into the mill, one half of the wheel into the mill, fitted it onto the spindle, went up and got the other half of the mill, fit it onto the spindle, put the thing together again. The guys, millwrights, come up the next morning, and Percy was there with a big smile on his face, and Israel was there. "We don't need you, boys. We already got it." I'm saying that story because you're talking about a man who had no formal training at all in millwright, and a man that had this incredible intuitive ability that he took, and he spent the rest of his working days with them, and he made the mill. By John Birchall's own account, Israel also was the man that kept that mill going.
He was the mechanical brains of it.
All big time. Like, just intuitive is what it was. Intuitive and beyond what anybody could imagine.
So, in effect, he was a civil and mechanical engineer with it to degree.
Yes, yeah, that'd be it, exactly. Yeah.
But that's the way the man machine was.
Yeah.
You fix it yourself, or you find a friend to help you with it, or it didn't get done.
And that's exactly what I discovered when I was doing this book. I interview some of the workers in the mill, and the stories they had to tell. Many of them, of course, you couldn't put in the book as a real characters. But same thing, they made that mill, and when combined with the Birchells, they made that from 1820 to 1980. They kept that thing going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's remarkable stories in both the books.
And remarkable people. Yeah.
And that's what I like about it too, is, today, the youth nowadays, I don't want to call them soft or weak, I don't want to use those words, but they don't really know the struggle of what occurred 25 years ago or even 60 years ago.
Yeah.
They don't know what it took to survive, on the basis of the grandparents at that time and place.
That's why what you're doing is so important. And I know that your job is, a lot of times you don't get the recognition that you need to
But
get.
it's not about me.
No, it's not about you, but on the other hand, if we in the membership did not have people who were willing to pick up the stories of people and to put them in front of them, that's the membership. I believe will probably have a legacy well beyond what comparative communities might have because of people like you.
But there's Dr. McCarthy, Dr. John McCarthy,
Yes.
does talks to people. There's Judy Loge that does talks to people in the community. So it's not.
That's the unique part of it, though, is that we have people who are willing to do that, and you need to accept that. Perhaps it's a role that you've walked into yourself, but it's a very important role, and it's a role that's not recognized as much as it should be. And the mayor, she's better off for it.
That was the beauty of what my dad figured out. He knew enough to know that he didn't know.
Yeah.
So he went to talk to Vince McCarthy. He went to talk to Sean McCarthy's father. He went to talk to any number of people who he knew more than Dad knew on topic A, B, or C.
Yep. Well, it's a good way of putting it. And he wrote it. He listened. And he listened and he wrote it down.
What
What they were saying.
The first step.
Yep. Well said. Yeah.
So that was the beauty of it, and we didn't really understand what he was doing up there in his office. In the house, we just knew enough to not, create enough noise to distract him, so we were always outside.
Yeah.
But, in the 80s, it came to mind that that's why you're doing it. So, there's other authors. Mrs. Collin did a book, I think, and
Yes.
Mr. King did a book, and a number of other people. Mrs. Gill did a book in Barnaby. So the pride of the area with the history that we have is widespread in my view.
Yeah. And that it makes it quite unique when you think about it. Eh?
Yes.
Most communities
That's
don't
right.
have that. Eh?
We were a small enough community and small enough and isolated that to take a trip to Moncton in the 50s was a big deal. So most of us didn't go more than 10 miles outside our own house, except maybe for the loggers up in the Fraser Birchall. Most of us revolved around our church, our community, our family, our neighbors. Like everybody identified with where they lived.
Yeah.
You lived on the front road.
Yeah.
You lived on the
Right.
South Nelson Road.
Yeah.
You lived on the Rabbit Road, right?
Yeah.
So the community sense was very, very strong because
Yeah.
they knew there's no one coming to save us. All we got is each other.
Yeah. And we were on the front row, wharf rats. We were they called us wharf rats.
There was a story there where I think you were voluntold by your dad to go down and get some creosote poles down off the wharf for John to put in his furnace.
Ah.
And of course, creosote is like, oh my goodness, what a flame that is.
But what happened was that there was an old mill that long since gone, and the pilings were sticking up, and he'd been laid off from the mill because they were doing something or other. And he says, and this is in the summertime, he says, I want to go and cut those pilings off and I could use them for firewood and let them dry. So I wasn't keen for that. I was 17, and I was thinking this was going to be the summer I was going to be able to get away. No, we spent the summer cutting the tops off of them and split them. But remember, they had the wedges and the sledgehammer, geez, and of course no safety glasses. No, that's all. It's don't need that stuff.
No, we don't.
So we got them all done. And at that time, Dad was a community leader, and they were having some discussions as to whether they want to have a fire department for Nelson. And he did his research and said, no, economically it doesn't make any sense. Well, some folks felt different from that, and so they said, okay, there was a coincidental to that. There was the first election in the village for Nelson and Rashid. So he put his name in, and Byron Gooden put his name in, and Byron won the election. And then they went ahead with the fire department, and a very effective operation, and they, do their job well. And he was never bitter about that at all. But I mean, he just said that's the way it goes. So anyway, fast forward, as you say, to I was one night up at the fire hall recreation meeting or something like that, and I heard the truck starting up. And I gave a thought, I was, geez, it's a cold night to be a four-wheeler. Fellas, too bad they had to do that. So I come down, and I was married at the time, and I come down to Mom and Dad's, and as I pulled in the front road, I saw red lights all over the place, and I went up to their house, and a fire truck was blocking the driveway, so obviously something's going on. Mm-hmm. And I look up in the lawn, and it was just a perfect picture. There was Dad, and again, it was a man of very few words. There was Dad standing, looking up at the chimney, and from the chimney was a flame, probably about 10 or 15 high, and there was Byron standing beside him. Byron at the time was a fire chief. And it was a perfect, lesson learned for him.
Remember, you don't always have the answers.
No, exactly.
And but
that was a good one. I like that.
That was the nature of the community, and as you say, there was characters, and we had their own individual personality, and tolerance. Yeah. Is what it's about. You didn't like somebody, but you tolerated them. That's the whole thing. It comes down, I think, to respect.
Oh yeah, there'd have to be respect there, John, because otherwise, to be on each other's show. Like he would see, for example, the lens of the fire department. Yeah. They wanted that and believed in it, mm-hmm. and they made that happen. And he saw that, and he respected them for it. He may not have agreed with them, but that's not the point.
No, it's not the point.
No.
Back then we had a sawmill in Nelson that was attached to Acadia, and that probably employed 20, 30 people.
Yeah.
And you had the Acadia pulp mill that employed probably 150, all inclusive, and then you had Birchall's probably 75 or 100.
Yeah, at that one time they were actually up to 120.
None of us had any real money.
No.
You lived hand to mouth, week to week, and you spent what you had, but you didn't spend any more than what you get away with.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Things were very frugal.
We grew up quite fast, and but the problem with growing up fast is that you don't have that important time for development as a child, and you don't get that.
You'd rather grow up to be a child a little longer than was really possible back then, because responsibilities of cutting wood, piling wood, shoveling driveways. There was a lot of physicalness going on just to survive.
Yeah, you had your job to do.
And you did your chores, and if you said no to a chore, you only said it once.
Yes, that's for sure. And then you had another one on top of that.
And everybody had double the chores.
Yeah,
so
exactly. Yeah.
That was a community we grew up in. Is very resource based.
Yeah.
And the church was very strong, and the volunteering was very strong. Alan Neal with the Boy Scouts, and even that outdoor hockey rink up by the fire hall was all supported by the community and run people that were just ordinary mill workers.
And you didn't expect anybody to come from outside and do this stuff.
No, we knew better. We knew better.
Exactly.
You know, and the community was run by really volunteers who happened to be a manual labor working in Birchall's, but he was this function after hours and did it rather well.
Yeah, exactly. John, you know when we're talking here, the two of us, I could just see my father and your father.
Oh, absolutely.
Exactly the same. Eh?
Yeah.
If there was a camera there, you'd see, you know, John, yes, Earl, you're right. Things aren't what they used to be.
I remember going down to your place, and there was stacks of, I think it was Newsweek and Maclean's.
Yeah.
And I used to flip through them, and we used to watch the evening news at 10 or 11 o'clock. And along comes bombs in Quebec City and the FLQ issue and the energy crisis, and the economy was crap for like 10 years.
And it was all so far away, though.
And we were insulated from it to some degree.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so it was an interesting time to grow up. But
it's a good time, I think, though, eh?
I had a good time.
Yeah.
You know, as long as you realized what your situation was in the world, and you couldn't go out and buy a new Skidoo every year because that just wasn't possible.
No.
So we knew limitations, but we made the most out of what we could do.
It's exactly what it is, the limitations.
Anything else you want to do?
No, that's good.
Hey?
That's good. That's good, John. You can't just remind me of our true parents.
I spent a lot of time down there, James and I.
Yes, you guys. He was always so. He's always so proud of you. You, because he spent the most time. You had spent the most time there.
Who was?
Dad.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, he was. He was a very. He didn't see the people that he thought a lot of. Unfortunately, he didn't and maybe couldn't say what he wanted to say.
Right.
But and that having you in his mind, he always thought a lot of you. That was different for him.
Your mother used to call me wee lad.
Oh yeah.
Is that so Irish, right? Wee lad.
Wee lad, yeah.
So.
And you know that thing about when you came to us, there wasn't a thought. He would be with us. 7 children, herself and her husband take care of 1 more. Not a thought. That's the people you're dealing with, you know.
It was incredible.
And the fact that your mom and your mom and my mom were so close. Every day they'd call, one would call.
Mm-hmm.
I used to, as a young lad, anytime I could bother your mother, when she called, no, and I was trying to get her going, but she always used to. Yeah. She had a rough life, your mother, when she lost her ability to get out physically, you know, walking and skiing. That was
quality of life degraded seriously.
Jesus, what a horrible thing. And you were saying, no, that's life. You know?
That is life. The older you get, the more genetics say,
yeah.
I don't think so, Ralph.
That's exactly it.
Anyway.